I'm in an area that is plagued by unhealthy food, economic problems. Why is one group of people have more access to food, healthy food than others? The system is not broken. It's doing exactly what it's geared to do.
Literally.
The food system needs to change.
My name is Mark Brand. You are listening to Better. I'm a social impact entrepreneur, so I build businesses that are in service to the greater community. So Better was formed to be a tool for everyday advocacy. I think anytime we take people's attention, we have to give something. Folks, welcome back to Better. It is always my distinguished pleasure and honor to introduce my guests. And this guest, Karen Washington, I was looking back through my photos, and then there's this really cool photo of you and I in Midtown Manhattan, like all bundled up, like multiple hats on in some busy ass building's lobby. And that was the second time we had met. So I've known you now for 13 years, and I'm excited to introduce you. All right, this is like one of my favorite parts. So today's guest is somebody that I learned from long before we ever met. So my knowledge of you goes back 25, 26-ish years. I was doing the count last night. Karen Washington is a farmer, an organizer, and one of the clearest moral voices in food justice, period. She doesn't talk about food systems from theory. She talks about land, about power, about who gets to eat well, and who's been told generation after generation that they shouldn't expect to. Karen helped change the language. She challenged the term food desert, which you all know I hate, and replaced it with what it really is, food apartheid. We're going to dig into that today. She spent decades building community gardens, reclaiming urban land, and reminding all of us that food is never just food. It's history, it's policy, it's dignity, it's power. What I respect most is that she's never chased trends or approval. She stays rooted, pun intended, in the soil, in community, in truth, and she calls us in, not out, to do better work with deeper integrity. This conversation today isn't about saving anybody. It's about listening, about responsibility, about what it actually means to show up for each other. I'm honored to share the space with my dear friend, Karen Washington. Karen, welcome to Better.
Yeah, so good to see you, Mark. Yeah, you said a lot. I'm listening to what you had to say, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, a pleasure. And so this is, part of the show, as I always say, that's how I introduce you. And that's how I speak of you in every room that you're not in with me. How do you introduce yourself these days?
I tell people first they call me Mama K, which is really good. I think I've earned that as a but I tell people I'm just an ordinary person trying to do extraordinary things. And then when I see injustice, I speak up and I speak out against injustice.
Yeah, well, we are swimming in a whole ass universe of injustice right now, and it's for everybody to see. But as you and I talked about a couple weeks ago when we got to hang out, everybody's seeing it now, but it's not new. None of it's new.
No, it's not new. And what's so ironic, we've been told time and time again that history has this a sense of repeating itself, and we're seeing it being played right in front of us. I'm in the United States, and so we have an administration that is really trying to erase history, trying to rewrite it in a way that is geared towards white supremacy, and colonialism, which is being played right out in front of us. And so we've got a lot of work to do. I try to tell people don't get caught up in the confusion, the chaos that's intended, but to sort of hone in on the local economy, your local community, to make sure that people are safe, that they're well fed, that they're being taken care of. And we will go through these next 3 years really doing a lot of work of organizing,
Mm.
getting people together and to strengthening our unity as human beings instead of separating what this um, current administration is trying to do.
Yeah, we love that. And my work and your work intersect in a really interesting way, which is the microcosms of the communities and neighborhoods that we work in knows not about the administration a lot of the time because the institutional racism and systemic violence that they have faced has never changed. It's now on the south of the border, obviously increasing in a way that's Gestapo-like, and we're all aware of it. And it has to be brought clear so that we can all act against it. But I want to take a couple steps back before you and I go forward. I think, the first time we got to hang out and I talked about what we did in, having people in the neighborhoods of the unceded Squamish territories in Vancouver, you told me a great story about Chef David Chang and Momofuku and your work in the Bronx. And that really, the reframe that you shared with me there helped me understand and inform my work. And that goes back 10 years ago. We had this conversation. But the way that you told it was informed by the brownstone that you and your family inhabited and what everybody was doing with their backyards and what your mother decided to do and like your introduction to food in that way. So I give you those two things because I think they're really powerful anecdotes and analogies for people. But I would love to you to start from the start. Tell us about where food justice like really lands in your body and how.
Well, the thing about it is that I grew up not even knowing anything about my history. To be honest, my relationship to food came from the fact that my mom was a good cook and everything came from a grocery store.
Mm,
And even though I was a healthcare professional at the time as a physical therapist, most of my patients came from the South or came from Latin America or came from the Caribbean.
right.
And so they had that background about where food came from, but yet it was a negative connotation that they had, saying that, they'll never go back down to the South, they'll never farm, farming is hard, it's slave work. And I grew up with that. And I think what changed for me is that when I moved to the Bronx and I had a backyard, I decided not to slab it with cement, not to put a lawn on it, but to grow food.
Mm,
And I decided with no experience whatsoever, decided to grow three things. And I wanted to grow collard greens, part of my history. I wanted to grow eggplant because it sounds funky. And I wanted to grow tomato. And it was the tomato that changed my world because the tomatoes that I would see in the grocery store, I hated. They were pink. They were three in a cellophane package and they taste horrible. Taste like cardboard.
mm.
And so when I grew my first tomato, first of all, it grew on a vine. I was mesmerized. It was red. What? And when I bit into it, it changed my world. It's tasted like a fruit. And so I think my that's when in terms of my relationship to food started to change. And then living in a low income neighborhood in the Bronx, surrounded by empty lots, which was happening in the late 1960s and 70s when New York had over 15,000 vacant lots. A lot of us did what we call guerrilla gardening and took over those lots and turned them into community gardens. But yet, I think for me, I really understood the relationship between food and the social issues that were happening.
Mm,
The social issues around health, around economics, around education, around housing, all these social issues that were surrounded with the main focus was on food. And I became interested and became an organizer and started to call out the system and started to show some sort of accountability of people who had power and privilege but were not doing the work
mm.
and using food as a weapon.
Right.
And so, I'm bringing it now to the work that I continue to do to make people understand that their power of speaking up and speaking out, and to hold elected officials accountable. You have a right to do that. And so I think I've been doing this like over 40 years now. And what I've seen is the youth now understanding their relationship to food, wanting to go back to the land, understanding the historical content on how they got there, how we got to this place. And so if you were to tell me maybe 20 years ago, so Karen, do you think that there'll be a food movement that black and brown people will want to get involved in? And I would say, hell to the no. Now you ask me now in
Right.
2026, I say hell to the yeah,
Yeah, right.
as people are starting to understand their relationship to food and power.
I love that. I'm gonna take it back to that moment because I want to zero in on that tomato story in particular because I think like we're teaching kids out here in Nova Scotia right now. We got this program called Sharpen Up, and we're taking kids who struggle socially and struggle to land. A lot of folks who are landed migrant and immigrant folks, and then other people who are just like struggling in the classroom and at home. And we give them food as power and all the tools. And when they have the bite of something that they've never actually tasted for the exact reasons you're talking about, because mass-produced, water pumped,
Mhm.
not food. This is not food. This is a facsimile of food. This is what would come out of a bad replicator in Star Trek. This is not actually food, right? And so when they have that first bite of something that they've made or they tasted, that's
Mhm.
it. Your body reacts in a way because we're made of it, it's made of us, right? Where you're intrinsically changed. And people are like, it can't be that simple. Like, yo, it's just that simple. You
It's
inspire
that
people by
simple.
experience. Experience is how you inspire people. And so I mean, we follow your work. Everybody, if we did a family tree of people doing any sort of urban agriculture, you're at the top of that family tree, whether people know because they're 1 degree separated or not. Like the way that you have held this space, I want to stay in the 60s and 70s for a moment because I want to know pre-internet what it was like to be this anti-system and what you faced because you and I've never really got to get into that and I'm so curious.
Yeah, and I think hopefully we're gonna come back to that because I think what we've lost, don't get me wrong, technology and the internet has been fabulous because it's really sort of broadened the scope of the conversation around food and justice.
Mhm.
However, back in the day when we did not have that, we did door knocking.
Right.
We got out of our houses and met in churches or met in community centers and sat down to listen to what the people actually were going through.
Mhm.
People were going through, we can't afford food.
Right.
We have, my family is sick because they're diabetic or hypertensive. They had strokes. Uh, the water is leaking in our apartment. There's no heat, no hot water. All these social things that we would have in meetings that we've lost that. We've lost that human connection or what it is to meet people where they are, to have that physical touch of looking in a person's eye and having them speak truth to justice of what is going on instead of trying to, extrapolate those feelings through a screen.
Mm.
And so hopefully, what is happening now is people being more conscious about the fact that, wait a second, we've lost that human connection, that human touch, that human expression of what it is to hear what the problems people are going through instead of assuming that, oh, because you live in a certain area, that these are the problems that people are having. And hopefully, as we go through the next 3 years here in the United States, that people are starting to understand the importance of door knocking, the
Mm.
importance of looking out for your neighbor, the importance of knocking on the door to make sure if an elderly person that you know that lives down the block, you're going to the store, you're knocking on that person's door and saying, I'm on my way to the store. What do you need?
Mhm.
Or, the family that just lost their automobile and you're knocking on that family's door and say, look, I can take your children to school.
Mm.
And so I'm trying to, in this sort of iteration, in talking to people, is like, let's start getting boots on the ground. Let's start understanding and knowing who our neighbors are.
Mhm.
Let's get out of the shell and start having community conversations, one-to-one community, so we understand exactly what is going on in our local community. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think we've lost that, but hopefully, where things are happening, where you're seeing now the marches in the street, that people are now saying, wait, we've got to organize more.
Yeah.
We have to have that human connection that we've lost in the past.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think what you're seeing is this false narrative that's been created in the two-party system of like it's you versus me. It's saying Andre the
Mhm.
Giant and Hulk Hogan. It's the Buffalo Bills versus the Raiders, right? That we've
Yeah.
been indoctrinated with this, it's you or me, it's us or them, it's other. And then when people are connected, they're like, wait a sec, what do you not believe in? Oh, wait, we don't believe in the same thing and we're facing the exact same fight. And oh, this has been designed to make us fight each other while everybody else extracts, right? We did this, and I shared this with you. In 2017, when that monster got elected, I was in the US and we took Willie Nelson's tour bus, his 1976 tour bus, and we went down the Rust Belt with about 20 organizers and activists. And we convened conversations with people who had voted that way. And it only took about 30 minutes to understand what happened, right? Like this wasn't, it's not rocket science. those people have been oppressed and their uncles had died of cancer because the plant shut down and there was toxic things in the river, and this is the other option. There's only 2 options, and if this did this to me, then I'm going this way. Right? And it doesn't like we overcomplicate this stuff instead of having empathy that the whole system, this is a much worse choice. I get it. But the whole system is designed to continue to keep people oppressed and to keep them under thumb and to keep them fighting each other. And I've learned a lot of that from you. And in those early days, door knocking, community organizing, what we're coming back to, you're right, we're going back to the land. What are the lessons, that you were centering right now in your community organizing? Because you and I had a real robust conversation about what you're working.
Yeah. So I'm working on what I call ecosystems. And what does that mean? I think I always preface this January 27, 2025, where prior to that, looking into the 2025 year, we were all excited. We were making such headway around food and social justice, undoing racism, having conferences, and people were doing extremely well. And then all of a sudden, my email starts, opening up, exploding, my cell phone exploding because anything that dealt with DEI
Mhm.
was being dismantled. Anything, any sort of project, any sort of funding. A lot of the work that we were doing in food relied on DEI funding. And all of a sudden it came to a halt. And so people were like panicking. They didn't know what to do. And a lot of people lost a lot of funding.
Mm.
And so what we did with the fellow groups of people that I know got together and said, you know what, let's look at the resources that we have. So let's look at the resources that so within the small area of New York State, we looked at, okay, so who within our community and resources, who does work around education,
Mm.
both and around food, both urban and rural. So we looked at SoFi Farm and Farm School. Who does work around distribution, how food is getting into communities that need it? Corbin Hill. Who is doing work around land as people are starting to lose land? Northeast Farmers of Color. Who's doing work around the political aspect and making politicians accountable? Black Farmers New York State United.
Mm.
And who's doing the funding, the resources? Black Farmer Fund.
Right.
And so you leave your egos at the door, you sit down at the table, and you find out who needs what and how do we share the resources to make sure that our community is afloat because the federal government could care less.
That's right.
This is intentional. They want us to fail. They want us to go back. They want to destroy us, but they're not going to do that. And so taking that example and going spreading that premise around the country when I go and speak is like you can do the same thing within your local communities. Form these so-called ecosystems or mutual aid and look within your local community who can do what
Mhm.
and how you work together to make sure that your communities are taken care of. Even within uh, the local community here, my daughter once a month has this thing called Sister Saturday, where she has a bunch of around 40 educators, and she started this tree because within the conversation is like, we need to know who is the local carpenter, electrician, plumber, Uber driver,
Mhm.
cook. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? It's like that.
100.
And putting it down on a map
Mhm.
so that when there is a need, look, I need someone to take care of my kids. I need a drive to the airport. I need, someone to cook some food for a family that's coming. I need the plumber. I need the electrician. This is what we need to do. And we've gone away from that. We've become so, like you said, the I and the me. We have been working in silos. A lot of it had to do with COVID, but now it's time to break out of those silos and look at what we can do in mutual aid. And like I said, ecosystems to make sure that our communities are taken care of.
I mean, I couldn't love that anymore. And what I need, I know every single organizer and activist and person attached to any impact driven work right now is saying, I've tried that. They're saying I've tried to rally troops and we run into these things. Like you are a very special case as a leader, as respected and deeply connected as you are. And we've had success having boots on the ground for 15 years, but some of the partnerships that we've had to cross the table with just came this year because they needed to see we were going to be there. They needed to understand that we were really serious about this. And, 6 million meals later, they were like, okay, all right, we can have the meeting, which is why, we don't begrudge that. We understand. We understand why they feel that way. We understand the retraction. We understand all of those things. I guess my ask for you specifically around this is, how do you get past, when you said check your ego at the door, every single person who works in nonprofit, especially if their resources dried up, is thinking about their resource and not sharing it because they're in a scarcity space, because they have scarcity. How do you move them past that fear of like, if Mark and I partner and my donor likes Mark better than me, then I lose my resource? And I'm using a very, A to B example, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but you don't need those people in your circle.
I mean, say that, yeah. Say
You
that.
don't need. But you don't need those. You don't need that negativity. You move on.
Right.
You move on. I just sit there and spin your wheels and try to convince people.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? That's you. That's your energy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if you don't want to help, fine. I'll find somebody else,
Right.
like-minded minds.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's what I say.
Okay.
Hey,
Yeah.
because there's someone else that might listen. And also for nonprofits, another thing with nonprofits, got to be very careful how you speak to communities because you cannot come with a savior attitude.
That's right.
You got to make sure that your intention is that you are supporting the work of the people that are doing the work,
Mhm.
that you have opened the door and allow the people to speak and not you to speak for them.
That's right.
And I think and because people, let me tell you something, my black people, we can see from a distance who is doing the work, how we are being used,
Yeah,
and stuff
absolutely.
and yet no,
Yeah.
because now is the time, like if you really are intentional about changing the narrative
Mm.
and doing the work, then when you have those town hall meetings and when you have these tables, see at the table, you better be bringing along the people in the community
Mhm.
and having them be the voice of what is happening instead of for so long there have been in the background, and as nonprofits you figure that you can be the voice of the people, and no, it's not that, it's not happening. Those days are
100%.
over.
That's right.
People can see that. And so again, there is and another thing that I'm trying to bring forward is trust.
Mhm.
What does engagement look like? What is outreach is not engagement. What does engagement mean? At the forefront is trust.
Mhm.
Building trust in the community because you can say whatever you want. It can sound nice. It can sound glossy. It can sound but if you don't have the trust of the people, then it's not going to fail.
That's
So
right.
what does that mean? In order for things to work, it's not only building trust, but building relationships.
Mhm.
So you're starting off with trust, you're building relationships. So, what does that mean in terms of engagement? It means that you're coming in and you're working with people over a prolonged period of time.
That's right.
That's how you gain trust. Because I've seen people come in, I mean, their intentions are all well and good. I do an hour or 2 hour presentation. I'm going to come in with my PowerPoint. I'm going to say this and then I'm going to leave. Or you have organizations that come in, I'm going to help feed, your community. Um, Maybe I'm there for a week or so, but you know what? I got to go on. And the thing about it is that you don't, then you're left with a community that no longer trusts anyone that wants to come in because they've heard it before.
Yeah, exactly right.
So if you are intentional about feeding people, undoing racism, then you have to meet people where they are and you got to be in the trenches with them
Mhm.
over a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, 100%. There's 2 things that come to mind for me. I think the first one is, and I love this. When we first started doing our food programming in the downtown east side, right, we're feeding people who are living in single room occupancy hotels or in shelters. And we are prescribing a menu. It's prescription based, right? Like I've decided what the menu is and this is how it's going to go. And I'm like, I want to get feedback from the tenants to figure out if this is delicious, if they're enjoying it, if they're not. But you're dealing with a very marginalized, often actively using population, right? So how do you get that feedback? And so we sent notes to the managers of all the buildings, went down, we're like, hey, can you just, ask folks what they like, what they dislike? We want to do more of what they like. And we got nothing back. And I sent some folks to each hotel and sat them down with a table. And I was like, you sit there, we're gonna stay a week and we're going to listen to folks and they're going to sit down when they feel comfortable and share when they feel comfortable what they're going to share in feedback. And the stuff we got back was so beautiful. It was so beautiful for what the likes and dislikes were. And when, we quickly shifted and our understanding got deeper. But as we shifted, everybody then got real excited about giving feedback because they're like, oh, I'm being listened to.
Right.
Like, you didn't just come there to check a box. You would genuinely wanna know what I wanna eat, and I'm like, Yeah,
Exactly.
you come to my house, I'm not telling you, like, I wanna know what you like. Like, we're not doing this for us. I know what I like to eat, I make that at home, but if I'm making thousands and thousands, we're like 6,000 meals a day now coast to coast. I need to know that this is something you're really excited about because this is how we show love, and that's the centering point. It's not about taking people from the brink of malnutrition and starvation. That we're not doing that. We're here to show you love and make sure that you know the meal's going to be there every day, that you're excited, that you co-created. And I think you're right. There's the entire system is based on dictation because if the idea that has been sold to funders or to government, whoever it is, then has to shift, indicates a failure. And to us, it just indicates a pivot or an iteration. That's not failure. It's just different. We're doing it different because the community is always changing and people are always changing and what they want is changing. So if the end goal is the same, that's great. And I say that because you and I both worked with folks who'll go nameless in the New York area who meant well and good, but when the energy dropped for them, many times over, right? The energy dropped and they weren't the cocktail conversation of the week, they left.
Right.
And it's like, that's when the work starts. Like, it's real easy to get people excited about an idea. It's like, what do you look like in year 3 when nobody's excited about the idea anymore?
Yeah. And then who is in control at that point in time?
That's right.
So a lot of problems that nonprofits do is they have this savior mentality. They come into communities because they want to try to fix things. Don't get me wrong, the intention is all well and good, but there needs to be a power dynamic shift of you coming in and really seeking out the leaders that are in there
That's right.
and giving them the tools so that you can leave and the projects and stuff can continue to go on.
That's
But
right.
that's not happening because you need that money in order to survive. So you're
Totally.
gonna hold on, you're gonna keep on to that narrative and not let go. And I've had that conversation a lot with some organizations that say, well, how am I gonna, how am I gonna feed my family and how well, that's not the problem. Your motto and your vision states that you are here to help people to be self-sufficient and self-reliant.
That's right.
And if you're there 10, 15, 20 years, something wrong with that.
Right.
I'm serious,
What are you
and
teaching? Rocket science?
I've had those hard conversations.
Sure.
It's like, because when I go in and and I'm around now nonprofits and I see who the leaders are, and the question I ask, well, how long have you been here? And when you're telling me 10, 15 years, then there's something wrong. You know what I'm saying? Because again, the intention is all well and good, but the thing about it is that that's part of nonprofits is to come in, help build community with sharing resources and moving on to the next thing.
Sure. Yeah.
But that doesn't happen all the time. And I did meet a lead of a nonprofit one time. I was in up at Yale, and she stopped me on the street, and she said, "You know what? I left my organization." She said, "I listened to you, and I left my organization because what you said. And guess what? The organization is doing well, and I'm so happy. I moved on to something else.
Right. That's beautiful. And there's not enough of those examples because people's identity
Mhm.
are too tied up in that is their defining characteristic. And it's like you built one, you could
Correct.
build another. Like there's other problems to solve.
Right.
There's other things to be doing. So I promised myself we would do this in this episode because I just had this conversation at an offsite with a crown corporation here in Canada. And one of the guests in this sort of brain bank that we're in said, we really have to fix the problem of food deserts. And that's a trigger for me every time that gets said.
Oh,
And so I'm like, a desert is a natural occurrence. And I just sort of let that hang for a second. And people were like, right. And what does that mean? And I'm like, does anybody in the room know what redlining means? And one person put their hand up and they were the American in the room. I'm like, cool, we're going to have a little education session today. So I would love Ms. Carrington Washington, if you would lead the session on the difference between food deserts, food apartheid, and a quick historical lesson for all of our listeners at home, because language is power. Language
yes.
is respectful of the truth of the situation.
Yeah, so, working in a marginalized community with limited sort of resources in terms of monetary resources, but very powerful in the fact that we were self-sufficient, self-reliant into who we are as communities of color. Um, what I was seeing is that we were asked to eat healthy and be healthy, but the surrounding areas we weren't seeing that. And so what people sort of coming up saying that communities that have limited access to food, just quote healthy food, no supermarkets, are labeled food deserts. And so I'm saying, wait a second, I'm in an area that is plagued by unhealthy food, economic problems, health problems, and you talking about a location?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? You're talking about it remind me of redlining where you had a map and you drew a red line around areas that you felt were undesirable versus those that were. And I'm saying, so now you have this map now and you're putting a pin where you feel that there's food deserts without having a conversation around people's lives.
Mhm.
We quote live in the greatest country in the world. Food is a human right, and
That's
yet
right.
you got poverty and hunger.
Uh-huh.
And no one is talking about it. And I coined that term food apartheid because I wanted people to look at us as humans.
Mhm.
Food is a human right,
That's right.
and not and start having those conversations is why there's hunger and poverty. Why is it based on the color of your skin? Why is one group of people have more access to food, healthy food than others? Why do one group of people where they live matters on the type of food that they have? Why is it that where one person has the economic means to buy healthy food and others don't? Why do those things come up and no one is talking about that?
Right.
I do have food. We have tons and tons of food, the fast food, the junk food, the processed food. We have that. We don't have healthy food options. And then on the back, she tried to tell us, oh, so we're food insecure, meaning that we have limited access, availability, safety to food, and you deemed us food insecure. And having people say, well, you know what? I can make them food secure by having them grow some vegetables on a lot, having them give up soda and drink water, have them exercise without looking at the social determinants that reinforce racism in today's society.
Mhm.
And so blowing that all out, I coined the term food apartheid, but I always say, you know what? The system is not broken. People believe food system is broken. I said, and then it needs to be fixed. No, it's not. It's doing exactly what it's geared to do.
Literally.
The food system needs to change.
Mhm.
And that change is shifting power. What? You talking about putting power in the hands of black and brown folks?
Yes.
Hell to the yes. because power is a drug, and people with power and privilege, they don't want to give it up. In fact, they want more. But I tell people with power and privilege, you got three options.
Mm,
Number one, either you can share your power, kumbaya, kumbaya.
uh-huh.
You can give it up, hell to the no. I'm not giving up my power. Why? Because if I give up my power, that means that you want something from me.
Yeah.
That's not happening. And the third is going to be taken away.
Mhm.
That's going to be the next revolution
That's right.
because you cannot continue to put people down, continue as they increase without repercussions
That's right.
of gaining power. So
That's right.
that's my thing. Yes.
All right, I'm gonna footnote this just with I was so excited to see the Black Panther Party armed and active, and I mean my level of excitement, I must have watched every single angle of every single video to say, "Oh yeah, how's this gonna land? How are you gonna feel about that? Like, how do you feel about feeling threatened and being people defending their right to be?" And so very similarly within the food system, you and I share a soapbox, and it's a big one about why this food is available or not available. We work with, Olympia from LA who is doing CSA boxes in the jungle. And her argument was, I mean, she was like 20 when she started her organization, was my mom took 3 buses to get to the grocery store. As a 3-hour return trip just to get groceries, where in every neighborhood that is predominantly white, you can walk to something. She said the only thing that we could walk to is a liquor store, one
Yep.
bodega, or a gas station, and there's no fresh food anywhere near us. That is by design. So when we talk about redlining too, I think redlining originated from mortgage brokers in the banks, right? They were like, we
Yep.
won't fund in these neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods were just neighborhoods of color. And so I think people were like, ooh, food security makes me feel safer. I'm like, you could be food secure in prison. Many of our peers use that analogy consistently. You get 3 square meals a day locked up. That doesn't mean you're sovereign. So I think the next
Correct.
analogy I want to move over to, and we're working on this in Nova Scotia. We've got this 2-acre farm that I'm super excited to bring you up to eat with us and share some stories this summer. But this particular thing, we want to give access to people to grow their traditional and generational foods. We want you to, no, we're not going to charge you. There's no just come, or we can grow it for you if you have access issues or you're too busy. We'll grow it and we'll bring it to you. The sovereignty piece, I would love to hear your analogy on that too, because this is 2 racehorses running in the same direction, right?
Yeah, and I always like to give honor to, we talk about food sovereignty, how it was started by La Via Campesino in the global south, where the peasants really started to talk about and act on uh, going against capitalism
Yes.
and understanding their right to land, their right to decision making, their right to owning seeds, their right to growing their own food
Mhm.
without the capitalistic inputs that have for so long have squashed that. And so I think what people are starting to understand is that they have a right to self-govern.
Mhm.
You know, they have a right to be able to have a say in what types of food that they want to put in their bodies or what they want to grow or what seeds they want to save. You know, in the United States, there's a handful of companies that are patenting seeds.
That's right.
Wait a second. And I got to get a lawyer. I got to find a lawyer who is going to represent Mother Nature,
Yes.
because how in the hell do you patent Mother Nature?
Yeah.
I mean, so I got to get a lawyer to stand up for Mother Nature, because you got companies that feel that they can own your nature, that they can own seeds, and yet, and yet in some instances, I don't want to say too much, but the fact that, again, this is something that a lot of people take heart to.
Yeah.
Every second as we talk right now, Mark, every second, the biodiversity of seeds are being lost.
That's right.
Every second.
Mhm.
And so how precious is that? And yet you have groups that understand the sovereignty.
Mhm. And that's it. So our mutual friend Mark Buckley, or Mark Earth as he likes to be called, and I did a presentation together in Thailand, right? And I'd never met Mark before. All I saw was food sovereignty Jesus walking into the room. I'm like, who is this motherfucker? Who is this dude right now coming through? And he got up on stage and he gave an hour and 15-minute keynote on potatoes. And I don't think I took more than 4 breaths the whole time. I was on the edge of my seat. He's like, there's 1,068 or some crazy number. And then went through, he's a scientist. He went through the potatoes. And when you think about people trying to patent seeds, I go directly to, the very worst actors in the space who are trying to patent the stuff that is poisoning us.
Mhm,
So I'm like, yo,
mhm.
you can have your 17,000 headed wheat kernel. Like, it's all yours, man. Like, I don't want to eat that. Nobody should be eating that. Gluten and dairy are tough enough for us all to figure out. Like, I think there's an other side to this movement. And I just left one of our growing rooms before I came over here. And one of my farmers is showing me all of these incredible microgreens he's growing. I haven't heard, how long have I been cooking, Karen? 35 years? I haven't heard of 80% of what we're growing over there. And so I think conversely, like the movements that we're talking about, people are active because they're aware that the threats are here and we're active, right? I'm like, how do we create the Norwegian, like UN-based seed bank, but in Dartmouth? Like, I
Right.
want that over here on my farm because I don't trust these assholes and I don't trust the system. And I definitely in no way trust the US judicial system to do the right thing here.
Correct.
So how do we
And that's
do it?
why we have to do it ourselves.
That's
That's why we have to do it ourselves. And I think a lot of people are starting to understand how important biodiversity is.
yes.
Because right now we're doing monocropping.
Mhm.
We're eating one set of potatoes, like you bring potatoes. It's a red potato, it's a Yukon potato. But wait a second, there's different varieties of all types of vegetables.
Yeah.
But we're locked in
Mhm.
on what can make money.
That's right.
And as a result, we've lost the biodiversity, the taste
That's right.
of what different foods taste like.
Yeah, I
And yet
was
you have people doing, trying to bring that back.
agree. I think I sent you a voice note when I was in Thailand too, because I got toured on a farm by a fourth generation Thai farmer, and he walked me through his agroforest, and he was pulling stuff out. I spent 4 hours with that family. I had never tasted anything that they fed me, and like new flavors. It wasn't like, oh, this is like anise. No, I don't know what the hell this is. Like, I don't know any of it. And then he took me to the market and showed me my first tiger prawn. I was like, "Oh yeah, we've been using tiger prawns in restaurants. They're about
Mhm.
this big." He's like, "No, those are krill essentially. Tiger prawns are about, about this big." I was like, "Oh man, that's why they're called tiger prawns. That makes way more sense." So like our understanding of the food system is so small, right? No, not professionals, but for just individuals because we're marketed again, 4 types of potatoes, 3 types of onions, and there's
Yep.
thousands and thousands of types for us to enjoy. And I think, the revolution is happening with agriculture and people of color specifically leading those charges into getting back into power of those land pieces. And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about your farms specifically, because I think these are examples that people can follow. You and I can speak in theory, which we're doing is really important. But I think also you've always been so action based. Tell us about the farm and tell us about like what that's been like.
Yeah. So Rise and Root Farm, we're going into our 11th year. We all started from community gardens in New York City. We're only an hour and 15 minutes from New York City, so we've never lost that connection. But what we wanted to do was to grow more,
Mhm.
to be more intentional about growing more, and then having a place where we could invite the people in our city to come up and see what it's like growing on larger spaces, but also what it's like in terms of the labor intensiveness
Yes.
of growing food and how to grow it without pesticides, fertilizer. We're lucky and blessed that we are in the Hudson Valley in the Black Dirt region.
Mm.
What does that mean? Normally soil is between 2 to maybe 5% organic matter, if that. We are between 20 and 40% organic matter.
That's crazy.
So we don't need any fertilization.
Mhm.
And so what our farm is about, our farm is rooted in social justice. It's called Rise and Root Farm. Is rooted in social justice because we've allowed our community to be part of our farm. We do a lot of educational workshops at our farm. We do a lot of tours on our farm. Our farm is a refuge for people who feel, because the reason why I say that, who feel that they are out of place. And I say that because we're four women, three of us are LGBTQ women, two of us are Black women of color. And so we run the gamut. And so we know there are people out there who have been targeted or feel out of place. They know that they can come to Rise and Root and have a safe place to be.
Mm.
You don't have to be working. You can just come and just sit and meditate and feel what we feel each and every day when we go out into that field and we grow our food and we say that we are stewards of the land. We are caretakers of the land. We don't own the land. We don't want to. Our intention is not ownership or leasing. Our intention is to take care of the land for the next generation of people who are going to come behind us.
Mhm.
And so it's been a labor of love. We grow a lot of food, but we make sure that the people that need it the most have access to our food. That our food is not premier food glossed over for people with power and privilege. No,
Mhm.
food is a human right.
That's right.
So everybody has access to our food. Everybody has access to food because it's a human right. So like I said, I'm 72 at this. I'll be 72 in a couple of months, and the farm is a healing farm. Is for me is really, to be able to eat food that has no chemicals, to be able to eat food because you put your hand and your love into growing that food. It's such a privilege, and for me, going back to the land has been spiritual.
Mm.
Has been a I say to myself as I sit and I look along the horizon, I look at the mountains and I look at the sky, and I say to myself, is that somebody traveled a long way to an unknown place for me to stand in their greatness.
Mm.
And so I take that internally as a gift to try to be the best that I can, to grow the best that I can with intention, with love, with grace, to make sure that people behind me will feel the same thing when they have that relationship to land. For so long, we've gone away from the land. We've been brainwashed of the negativity about land. But I want our people and I want people to come to the land and embrace it. Because I tell them, when you look at the color of your color of skin is soil.
Mm.
So you do belong.
Oh, so beautiful. I feel like I want to ask 100 more questions, but I don't think that there's any better close than what just was shared. So we're gonna finish on that thought. I can't thank you enough for the time today. As always with you and I, we just went through an hour, like didn't even blink. Is there anything that you would like to leave our audience with? A final thought?
Yeah, please support our farm. We're risandrootfarm.com. We're trying to move our farm not only into production, but a lot of programming
Great.
because we feel that education is part of farming. It's not only about growing food, but educating the next group of people on the intention of their relationship to food and justice. So thank you so much, Mark, for having me.
A real
Sending you
pleasure.
love.
Lots of love right back to you folks. Everything will be linked in the episode so you can check out Rise and Root Farm. Karen, you are a gift and a treasure to all of us. Thank you for allowing us to walk in your greatness, and we promise to pass it on.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye now. I'm Mark Brand, and you've been listening to Better.